Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
And now I would like to introduce our main speaker, Jim.
Back up here. Good evening. My name is Jim McNally. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Jim. I want to thank Jerry for inviting me to speak here tonight. You know, it's an honor and a privilege and a hell of an inconvenience to be here. I want to welcome the new people that have identified themselves as alcoholics and those who did not stand and identify themselves. I wish you the gift of desperation. I hear that's how we get here. I also want to congratulate the birthday people. It's always good to see a lot of birthdays. It just demonstrates once again that this thing works and works really well. First time I got drunk, I was about 12 years old. I was visiting my cousin in town. We lived on a crappy little farm north of Sioux City, Iowa. Now, that's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. And I was visiting my cousin in town, and around Christmas time, right around this time of year. And, you know, we had the candy and the peanuts and all the goodies that are around at that time of year. And we found a quart of sloe gin in the house. And I ate a half a pound of Spanish peanuts and drank that quart of sloe gin and re-stuccoed my cousin's house. 25 years later, I was taking a little nap on my kitchen floor up in Ojai, California. 2:30 in the morning. I'd closed the bar at 2, and I was napping on my kitchen floor at 2:30. I'd had a late dinner, which consisted of a cold chicken leg out of the refrigerator and a quart of Mogen David wine, cold Mogen David wine. And I was lying on my back on my kitchen floor throwing up straight up in the air. And trying to dodge the wine mist that was drifting down, you know. And those are the bookends of my drinking career. That was the first and the last of my drunks. Now, I drank later than that, but that was my last drunk. I'll tell you a little bit about what happened in between those drunks so that I don't have to stop right now. But I went to school like everybody else. I hated school from the very first to the very last day. I was in school for 16 years. And I hated every minute of it. I was not a good student. I was, you know, if I had been born 35 or 40 years later than I was, I would have been diagnosed with ADD. People didn't know about such things when I was in grade school and high school. They just referred to us as unruly little bastards, you know. And they beat the hell out of you if you didn't sit still in your seat. That was how it worked. And you know, but I really believed that that would have been the case with me because I was restless, irritable, and discontent all the time that I was in school. Well, I got out of high school in 1952. That'll give you a little bit of an idea of how old I am. And I was 169th out of a class of 175 from the bottom. And, you know, I had no ambition to do anything other than be out of high school. I had no ambition to go anywhere else, do anything else. And I was working in a gas station. I had an old hot rod that I had built, and I was racing my old car and working in a gas station. That's all I intended to do in the summer of 1952. And then we had a bad epidemic of polio that year, and I got polio and spent 105 days in a hospital and lost the use of my legs. I walked on crutches for 52 years and ended up last year getting this little Mercedes-Benz scooter. you'll notice the emblem on the front. It's not really a Mercedes-Benz. They don't mess making scooters. This is a Japanese scooter. But anyway, it just adds a little color to the deal. I had no ambition to do anything else. I was laid up for a long time, and one day a guy from the Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Department came by my house and said, "We'd like to talk about sending you to college." And I laughed at him. I said, I almost didn't make it out of high school. Why would I be interested in going to college? And the guy said, well, we have this program, blah, blah, blah. And I said, besides, I'm not interested in your charity, thank you very much. I was a little hostile, and a little angry and pissed off, pardon the vulgarity. And he said, well, look, we're not talking about charity. We're talking about making you into a taxpayer. And I thought, gee, that's an odd approach, making me into a taxpayer. Well, so I decided to go and become a taxpayer. And so I went into this little college down in eastern Iowa, and I studied political science, which I thoroughly liked. But I was there for 3 years when the head of the political science department said to me, McNally, you have a kind of a weird linear way of thinking. Have you ever thought about studying law? And I hadn't thought about it before that, but it plugged in an idea. And so I quit college and went to law school over at Omaha, Nebraska at the Creighton University School of Law, run by the Jesuit fathers over there. It's a hell of a good school. And I actually shaped up. I cleaned up my act for about 6 weeks. And I stopped going to the bars. I put on a suit and tie, went to class. I briefed the cases. I recited the cases. I studied the law. And I didn't get very good grades. Now, it never occurred to me that nobody else in the freshman class got good grades on the first quarter exams. But I'm an alcoholic. I took it personally. I said, these clowns don't know talent when they see it. So naturally, I quit going to school and hung out in the bars. I hung out in Jim's Bar down on California Street in Omaha. And in less than a year, I drank my way out of that school completely. They didn't want to talk to me even after I messed their whole program up. And so I bummed around for a year, and then I went back to law school at the University of South Dakota at Vermillion. And I know you've all spent your summers in Vermillion, South Dakota. It really is the end of the world, I got to tell you that. But that's where the university is, and it was 40 miles from my hometown, so I drove back and forth every day. And I got a degree from there in 1961 and got licensed to practice law in Iowa and started practicing in an old real estate firm downtown, where they assigned me to examining abstracts of title to real property. And that job is one of the dullest jobs on the face of the earth. What you do is you take a giant pile of papers consisting of the history of this piece of dirt. And it goes from the original government patent, which is when we stole it from the Indians, to the present day. And you study this mountain of papers, and you write an opinion about who you believe owns the property, who has legal title to the property. I didn't give a damn who owned the property. I couldn't care less. I was drunk in the bars every night, and I was sick, shaking, hangover in the daytime, and I was drinking quarts of water, and I didn't give a damn who owned the property, and it was not a successful alliance that I had made with this firm. So a friend of mine, Donald O'Brien, had been appointed United States District Attorney by John Kennedy in 1961. And Don called me on the phone and said, how'd you like to be a federal prosecutor? And I said, sure, I'd like to start today if I can. And he said, no, you have to be investigated and so on. And so after a brief investigation, I got appointed by Robert Kennedy in 1962. And I served there a few years as a federal prosecutor. And the only thing that changed about my life was the fact that I was falling off better bar stools. I'd been falling off of those wooden bar stools and hitting that brass rail. That'll hurt you. But you go uptown where the fancy people are, and you sit on one of those nice upholstered bar stools, and you fall off at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they don't even hear you fall because you've landed on this beautiful carpeted step. Well, that's the only thing that changed about my life. Nothing else changed. And then John Kennedy got assassinated, and Lyndon Johnson became president of the United States, and we didn't care much for Lyndon Johnson. And so I left the federal government and decided to run for the state legislature. If you drink a lot like I did, you'll get ideas like that. So I got on the ballot in 1964. I got married in June, and I started campaigning in the bars as God intended us to do. And, I worked very hard. I worked my butt off. I campaigned 24 hours a day. I was shaking hands in the meatpacking plants at 2 a.m. when they changed shifts, and I was walking through the stockyards, the Sioux City stockyards, where thousands and thousands of cattle used to be traded, and shaking hands with all the cowpunchers. And I worked my butt off, but I could have stayed home. It wouldn't have mattered, because in 1964, Lyndon Johnson was running against Barry Goldwater, and some of you may remember, you're not old enough to remember, but you may have read that Lyndon Johnson won that election by a huge landslide, carrying himself and a lot of other incompetents into office, including me. I woke up the day after the election, and I looked at the paper, and sure enough, I'd been elected to the state senate. And what do you do now? Well, one of our brethren ran for the House of Representatives at the state level. Iowa has a House of Representatives like California has an assembly. And when he ran from one bar, he campaigned in one bar. He never left this one bar. And when he was elected in the landslide, he was heard to remark, now that I'm a representative, am I supposed to report to Des Moines or Washington, D.C.? He didn't know if he was a state or a federal legislator. That deal hasn't changed a damn bit back there, believe me. Still the same. That's another pitch. I moved my wife to Des Moines. She was pregnant. We moved to Des Moines, and I set up headquarters in the Savory Hotel bar, where all the high-level government business was being transacted. And that means that the legislators were getting drunk there every day. And that's what I did. I drank a lot of booze. The lobbyists would buy you all the booze you could possibly consume and anything else your little heart desired. And so I drank a lot of booze, and lots of booze. And it wasn't going well at home. Naturally, my wife delivered our first child in March of 1965. And it wasn't going well because I was never home. And one day a guy from my hometown comes down to my office, and his name was Dick S. Dick S. was a well-known drunk in Sioux City, and he'd sobered up through Alcoholics Anonymous, and everybody knew that too. He comes to my office and he says, if you ever run into anybody down here that you think might have a drinking problem, we have these 20 questions that the Johns Hopkins Hospital has created as a test to determine whether you're an alcoholic, and he hands me these 20 questions. And I looked at the bottom first. We might have been drunk, but we weren't stupid. I looked at the bottom, and it says, if you can answer any 3 of these questions yes, you are definitely an alcoholic. I thought, Jesus, I don't want to be definitely an alcoholic. So I answered one of them. Maybe drinking was making my home life a little unhappy once in a while, which was a big lie. Well, this guy made me very nervous, so I got him out of my office, and I put those 20 questions in the back of a New Testament Bible where they would avoid any further scrutiny. And I went about my business of drinking. But the problem with being a perpetual hard drinking drunk is that eventually something will give. And in my case, it was my physical being. I was drinking every day, pretty much all day, and my idea of dinner was a hard-boiled egg and a pepperoni out of one of those dirty bottles on the bar. That was dinner. And you keep doing that, and your body will give up eventually. And mine was showing real bad signs. I had like 400 cholesterol, and my metabolism was shot. I had high blood sugar and all this stuff. So my local doctors didn't know what to do with me. So they sent me up to Rochester, Minnesota, to the Mayo Clinic. And the doctors at Mayo asked me some real dumb questions, like, do you drink a lot? And I gave them a dumber answer, like, I have an occasional social drink. And they'll take you at your word. If you tell them a big lie, they'll write it down. That's the history, they call it. And they're not capable of determining, truth from falsity. But if they'd been a little more hip, they might have asked me, how close together are those occasions, and how big is the drink on each occasion? They might have done that, but they didn't. They wrote down occasional social drink. And after 3 days of examinations, they said, we think we know what's wrong with you. I said, what do you think's wrong with me? And they said, we think you have executive stress syndrome. I kind of liked the sound of that. It had a classy name, and there was nothing in there about booze or abstaining from booze. I liked that part even better. So I said, what do you do about executive stress syndrome? And they said, we have these blue tablets, 10 milligram Valium tablets. And they said, when you feel stressed, take some of these tablets. I felt stressed all the time, so I took them all the time. And you know, if you drink a quart of whiskey and take a couple of handfuls of those blue tablets, you'll get very serene some days. I got so serene some days I couldn't hit my rear end with either hand. And it was not going well. I just sort of numbed out. In that period, I just sort of numbed out. I wasn't quite blacked out, and I wasn't quite rational, but I was just kind of numbed out. And that was going on, and I resigned. I didn't run for the second term in the legislature. I developed a kind of a paranoia, and there wasn't anything that I actually should have been afraid of, but I resigned and became a lobbyist. And that wasn't going well, because a lobbyist is a natural place for a drunk to be. You know, you get a good salary and expenses that you can spend on booze or anything else you want to do to influence legislation. Get these legislators to vote your way on bills. And I drank every day, all day with the legislators, and when they went home at night or passed out, I'd lobby the barmaids and the bartenders and anybody else that wanted to drink. And it was going very badly. And so in July of 1968, we're up to 68 by now, my wife and 3-year-old daughter and I are traveling in my old station wagon between Omaha, Nebraska and Des Moines on Interstate 80 when a lady rear-ended us doing about 90 miles an hour and booted us off a high embankment, rolled us over 7 times. My wife was thrown out on the freeway and killed that day. And my daughter and I rolled up on fire in the bottom of a creek bed. And a couple of U.S. mail truck drivers pulled us out of that wreck. I had a broken shoulder and some broken ribs, and I wasn't seriously hurt. I had a lot of cuts and bruises, and my daughter was not physically injured. And but I was hospitalized for 6 or 7 days, and when I got out of the hospital, I was at home in Des Moines, and you know, I'm sitting on the edge of my bed. I was grateful for only one little tiny thing, and that was that I hadn't had a drink that morning when the accident occurred. And but I finally, after contemplating the situation for a while, decided that all of the trouble that I'd had in my life had occurred in Iowa. Now, if you're a thinker like that, and I see there are a few like that in here, the answer is very simple: just get out of Iowa. So I got my elderly mother put together, convinced that, like that, you know, of mice and men, things are going to be better when we get to California. Somebody once said that the United States continent, the continent of North America, is tilted slightly to the southwest, because eventually everything that's loose rolls out to California. That's kind of true in my case. So we moved out here to Ojai, California, up by Ventura, 10 miles, 15 miles inland from Ventura, and I found the Firebird Tavern up there right away, and spent 3 years in the Firebird Tavern, drinking every day. I managed to get through the California bar exam by a direct act of intervention by God, I think. And I started practicing law in an old frame house down in Ventura. I started doing a lot of criminal defense work because I'd done some criminal defense work in Iowa, and they don't give the new kid on the block the fancy probate cases and all that stuff when you come out to a new state. So I did a lot of criminal defense work. And if there's anybody in here that I represented, I'm glad you're out. Actually, the truth is I had some pretty good luck. Even though I was drunk every night in the bars, I had some pretty good luck, and I was getting better and better cases. But I was dying of alcoholism. By this time, I was so far into my alcoholism that I would cross-examine police officers and sheriffs and highway patrolmen all day, every day, trying to humiliate them and make them look like the Keystone Cops, you know. And then at night, I'd be drunk in the bars. And I was always a little nervous that they were going to catch me on the freeway with a 2.6 blood alcohol. And because they will remember, believe me, if you humiliate one of those people in court, they will remember you if they pull you over. Oh, hello, lawyer McNally, and nice seeing you again. So I would stay in Ventura as much as I possibly could and sneak back to my office and sleep under my desk. I had a big old conference table, and that was my desk, and I would just crawl in there fully clothed, sleep under the desk, and it was crazy, fully clothed, suit and tie. Wake up in the morning, the tie is over here. And my partner would come in and look under the desk. Hi, Jim, how you doing? Fine, very well, thank you. And not very well at all. One day I crawled off under that desk and picked up the newspaper, and there was a story in there about the Sarah Retreat House in Malibu, California, which had burned in a fire in 1970. They were rebuilding it, and part of it had been rebuilt at least enough to have these retreats that they were offering, these spiritual retreats. And I'd been to retreats before. I knew what they were like. But I had never been to a retreat with the idea of finding out what the hell was really seriously wrong with me. And I knew there was something desperately wrong with me. And I should have known what it was, because Harold Hughes was the governor of Iowa when I was in the legislature back there. And Harold Hughes was a well-known, nationally known recovered alcoholic in AA. His anonymity didn't last very long when he became governor. And he was making 12-step calls out of the governor's mansion. And he was a hell of a man. And, I should have known better, but his case was different from mine. If we're looking for the differences, we can certainly find them. And I looked for the differences, so I couldn't identify. So I really didn't know what was wrong with me. And I called this retreat house, and the woman said, you could make a retreat this weekend if you wanted to, but the retreat this weekend is for alcoholics. And there's a long silence on my end of the phone. I said, I'm not an alcoholic, but I'll come anyway. If you're a slippery, sliding criminal defense lawyer, you keep your options open. I might be, I might not be, Yes, maybe. Don't admit anything, If I used to tell my clients, it's a pretty nasty thing to say, but I would say to them, look, there ain't no deaf and dumb people in jail. If the man stops you on the street and says, and you've got a church steeple sticking out of your back pocket, we'll say, you tell the man, I don't know nothing about no church steeple. And but people that think that way, that have that closed, completely defensive attitude about life, like I had, are not likely to cop to anything. In fact, my motto in life was a future friend. An enemy is a future friend with evidence. I turned that around. A friend is a future enemy with evidence, is what I meant to say. But I went to the retreat. I went down there, and there were 25 or 30 guys that looked like the guys here. They were clear of eye and steady of hand, and they didn't seem to be shooting at each other or cutting on each other or fighting each other like most of the alcoholics that I knew. And so I stayed for the meeting on Saturday night at Malibu. And they had an AA meeting. So they invited me to stay, and I went to the AA meeting, and these guys were going around this big table talking about things I'd never heard men talking about my whole life. They were talking about fear. They're talking about night terrors, waking up at 3 a.m. with the hair standing up the back of your neck, sitting up straight up in your bed, terrified, not knowing what you're afraid of. They talked about moving from one state to the other to get away from yourself, or one job to the other, one wife to the other, whatever, running away. And they were reading my mail. So when it came my turn to talk, I said, my name is Jim, I'm an alcoholic. I didn't believe it when I said it, but that's not a surprise. I'd said a lot of things in my life I didn't believe. And so what's the big deal? In fact, I had lied to so many people about so many things. I lost the ability to know when I was lying and when I was telling the truth. I couldn't tell you for sure if I'd made this up or whether I had actually done it. But two of the old timers cornered me after the meeting. They saw that I was still burping up beer bubbles. And they cornered me after the meeting, and one of them said, we think you may drink some more, but we have screwed it up so you won't enjoy it anymore. And the other guy said, look, if you want to be sober, may I suggest that you go back to Ventura and find somebody in AA back there and talk to them and go to some AA meetings and see if there's something that you can use in the AA meetings. He was not nearly as sharp as the first guy. So they were both right. I went back to Ventura. I got drunk, naturally, and got sick again, and called a guy that I knew was a member of AA, an old guy named Bud G. And Bud G was a longtime member of AA, and Bud said, if you want to be sober, I suggest that you go to the AA meetings. And you could start today. I thought, today? That seems a little soon, don't you think? And he said, yeah, today. They have a meeting at 3 o'clock at the Norman and Cooper Manor in Oxnard. I'd never heard of the place before. So I go over there in my dinged-up alcoholic Cadillac and my bullshit three-piece shiny suit, and I go to the meeting over there at the Norman and Cooper Manor, and it's everything that you would fear if you were a brand new alcoholic. There are 12 or 13 old apostles sitting around this table. It's a low-bottom drying out place. I used to call it the Korsakoff syndrome place. People went there to die of alcoholism. And these guys are all in their blue terry cloth robes and their rubber flipper shoes, and the head leper is reading from a blue book. And he's saying, if you want what we have, Jesus Christ. I thought, if I don't get out of here in a minute, I may get what he has. So I left and I went back to Bud and I said, Bud, why in the hell did you send me to this genetic misfit outfit? I mean, God, these people are rowing with one oar in the water. And he didn't care much for my reaction to the AA meeting. He said, well, they have meetings for big shots in Beverly Hills. I thought for a minute, I thought, well, that's about right. So he gave me the directions to come to the RODEO meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in LA. And, on a Friday night, I drove 75 miles from Ventura to the RODEO Drive group of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was actually on RODEO Drive then. And I might have passed 50 perfectly good meetings to get there. I didn't know that. I didn't know anything about AA at all. So I go to this meeting, and I like it there because they've got Maseratis outside, and they got beautiful women inside, and, I felt like I died and gone to heaven. Now, I was still drinking. Did anybody hear a noise? Good. I'm glad you heard it too. I hear them sometimes and other people don't hear them. But one Friday night I was attending that meeting and there was a gorgeous woman giving a 10-minute talk up there. And I had decided that I wanted what she had and would go to any length to get it. So now she has a different version of this part of the story, and if you want to hear it, you're going to have to ask her to talk. But I invited her out to coffee after the meeting, and she went. She had her 10-year-old daughter with her, and we went out to coffee, had a marvelous time, and we started talking on the phone and dating, and 87 days after we met, we got married. That was December 3rd of 1971 we got married. And just this last 3rd of December, we celebrated 34 years of marriage. And, she's still gorgeous, and I'm still nuts about her. It's 34 years later. And, isn't that cute? Isn't that sweet? But, it turns out that marriage was not a cure for alcoholism. I was still drinking. So Mary moved her 2 kids up to Ojai, and we put those 3 kids together, and they didn't fit too well. And I'm still drinking. I'm going to the Firebird and getting drunk, and, every 10 days, every 20 days or so. And I'm getting to the point where I know for sure this isn't going to work for me. I'd gone to a hell of a lot of meetings. I'd listened to really good speakers. I'd listened to Chuck Chamberlain and Norm Alpe and Jim Ryan and all of these wonderful speakers. And, nothing was coming through. At some depth, I'm sure today that what I thought had to happen is that I had to do this myself, basically. Some idiot had told me this is a do-it-yourself program. Well, I'd been doing it myself for 25 years, and what I was doing never worked. But I got to the place, kept drinking, going to the meetings, drinking, going to the meetings. I got to the place where I surrendered to alcohol. I gave up. I knew for sure I was never, ever going to be sober. This thing might work for you, but I'm way too smart for this thing. I'm a borderline genius, a kind of a borderline mystic, a brooding genius that has to sit in the bars and do this. I didn't realize I was just a sick son of a bitch. I didn't know that. I just did not know that. So I kept drinking naturally, and then one day, I'm in the Firebird at night. Mary's in L.A. I'm in Ojai, and I go in there and I have a bottle of Coors, drink the bottle of Coors, pour one glass out of the second bottle, drink the first glass out of the second bottle, and push the second half of that bottle back on the bar and walk out of there. I'd never done that in my life before. I'd never, ever stopped in the middle of a bottle of beer. And haven't had a drink of alcohol since that day. That was March 30th, 1972. That's 33 years ago. And it seems like yesterday because I can still see that bottle of beer sitting on the bar with the sweat running down the side of it. And, and after that, after I had my last drink, my life got to be a sea of tranquility, and we lived happily ever after, Lying is one of the last character defects to go, they say. No, it got worse. It got worse because I fell in among a bunch of people that didn't believe in taking any kind of pills that affect you from the neck up. They said, we don't take pills that affect us from the neck up. And so I threw away my Valium stash. And I got real anxious when I threw away the Valium. And I got anxious to the point where I would hyperventilate, have an anxiety attack, hyperventilate my way into the emergency room where I thought I was dying of a coronary. And that happened, those anxiety attacks happened for 2.5 years after I had my last drink. So I know something about anxiety. But I don't want to do that again. I didn't take any pills or seek any other kind of assistance. I just stayed very, very, very close to AA. Mary taught me how to breathe into a brown paper bag. When you get an anxiety attack, you just breathe into a brown paper bag, and it somehow equalizes the blood gases, etc. And but somehow it got better. And everything started slowly, very, very slowly, getting better. I'm about running out of time here, so I'll leap forward ahead a little bit. 10 years went by, and I had been trying cases in court all my adult life, all over the country. I'd been a trial lawyer from the time I was 27 years old. And I got tired of doing it. I was looking around the courtroom one day, and I see the only person in the entire room that seems not to be working is the judge. He's sitting up there going, sustained, overruled, sustained, overruled. And he isn't writing anything. He isn't doing a damn thing. So I thought, that would be a good job for me to have. So I put in an application to be appointed to the Superior Court up in Ventura County, and they sent me a 30-page questionnaire, and I had to fill out hundreds and hundreds of things about cases that I'd tried and so on. And one of the questions was, is there anything about your life that the governor should know in considering you for appointment? I put in there, yes, I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous for 10 years. I don't share that at the level of press, radio, films, or TV, and I hope the governor won't either. Now, I know that's flippant as hell, but I didn't have any expectation whatsoever that I was going to get appointed. And then they sent a commission, a 4-person panel of people down to question me about my alleged qualifications for this job. And it went well. We had a good 2-hour discussion about philosophy and judicial philosophy and all this kind of junk. And finally, this one woman on the commission said, Mr. McNally, how can we be sure that you won't show up drunk some Monday morning if you're appointed to the court? Ooh. I thought for a while, and I finally said, I can't promise you that I won't show up drunk some Monday morning, because when I was promising people that I wouldn't show up drunk, I was showing up drunk. But if I keep doing what I've been doing for the last 10 years, as faithfully as I've been doing it, there's a reasonable chance that I won't show up drunk. That's as much as I can promise you. And I thought, right after that, this rigorous honesty bullshit just cost you that job. Well, it didn't. I was appointed in 1982 and served for 12 years on a Superior Court up in Ventura County. And it was a fantastic experience, a good, bad, terrible, wonderful experience. And my anonymity lasted about a week and a half. I was doing juvenile delinquency court at first, the first assignment I had, and I knew this kid that was coming to court for reviewing his probation. I knew him from the meetings. I'd seen him around the meetings for about a year. He was doing fine. I thought, why the hell are they keeping him on probation? He doesn't need to be on probation. So I took him off probation one day, and he said, can I come up and shake your hand? He comes up to the bench, shakes my hand, says, thanks, Judge. He turns to a courtroom full of people and says, I'll see you at the AA meeting tonight, Judge. What do you say? I said, so much for anonymity, Well, somebody pointed out to me not too long ago that he really didn't break my anonymity, because unless the press was involved in there, and they weren't there. But still, it changed my life, because I right away became the pinko commie liberal judge who would cut slack to alcoholics and addicts. Because I sent hundreds and hundreds of people to AA, NA, CA, GA. I even sent a woman to Al-Anon one day. And she needed to be in Al-Anon, believe me. She was buying this guy a gallon of wine every day, and he was drinking it and dying of alcoholism. I thought, Jesus, we got to head this off some way, you know. But you know, I'm about out of time here. I'm going to wind it up by saying that. I was leading a meeting up in Ojai one time, and signing the court cards. The leader up there gets to sign the court cards, and I saw this guy coming up to get his court card signed, and his neck was red all the way to the top of his head. He didn't want to be at this meeting. He was so angry he couldn't believe it. And when he came up, I thought I'd lighten him up a little bit. So I said, "Did you get a little nudge from the judge?" And he said, "Yeah, you son of a bitch. You're the one that sent me here." So I said, "Well, I'll recognize this signature on your card when you bring it in." But, you know, it wasn't all fun and games, I can assure you of that. A lot of people that I sent to AA and NA and CA didn't make it. You know, lots and lots of them didn't make it. I had a guy come in with 6 months of meetings on a card. He had 6 months, and I said, "Did you really go to 6 months, all those 200 meetings?" He said, "Yeah, I did." Well, the problem was that the meetings were all signed by the same pen and all in the same handwriting. And they were supposed to represent maybe 25 or 30 different kinds of meetings, you know. So I said to him, "You know, they must have read the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous at those meetings, did they?" And he said, yeah, they read them at every meeting. I said, "If you can recite any one of the 12 steps, I'll take you off probation." Poor guy couldn't do it, you know. He'd had somebody sit down and sign all these cards, you know, and that's not unusual. I'm sure there are people that are sitting in here that are going to go home and sign their cards. Just don't get caught. Don't go in front of a judge that goes to AA. That's my only advice to you. But, you know, I got to wind this up. It's 25 after, and it's more important to quit on time than it is to say anything. And so it's important for me to say that I wouldn't be alive today if I had not taken all 12 of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and in the order in which they were written for us intellectuals, 1 through 12. And I have had a spiritual awakening as the result of taking those steps. And I have to say hurriedly that the spiritual awakening that I've had has been of the slow educational variety, like is referred to in the appendix 2 of the big book. Slow educational variety. That's the only kind of spiritual experience that I've had, and you know, it's changed my whole life. I had a higher power when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous that was an angry old white guy in the sky that would drop you into a pool of everlasting fire for some damn small infractions, really some chicken little infractions, you know. And this was kind of an Ayatollah Khomeini kind of God that would chop your hands off for stealing 15 cents, you know. And I don't know where it came from. It was impressed upon me as a child, apparently, and I just bought into it for a long, long, long time. And I hung on to that higher power idea for 18 and a half years after I was sober. I don't know why. I can't tell you. Some people are sicker than others. But finally, one day, I just had to let go of it. I let go of it altogether. And I don't have that kind of a higher power at all anymore. The higher power I have today is one that is a kind of a temporary higher power. I hope I develop a different one eventually. But the one that I have today is I just refer to as the healing power of Alcoholics Anonymous. The healing power of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not very specific, but it works for me today. And that's the higher power that I pray to, and that I invite the blessing of that higher power on all of us tonight. Thanks. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. And if that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.